Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Indian Debating League. My name is Pranay and I'm your host for the day as always. And with me today, we have one of the world's most accomplished young debaters on the hot seat. Andy is a student of philosophy, political science, economics, and sociology at Trinity College Dublin, where he also serves as a key leader in Europe's oldest debating society, the Hist. His debating journey is extraordinary, not just for its success, but for its scale. Before entering university, Andy had already won two of the world's largest secondary school debating championships, establishing himself as a major talent. At Trinity, he went on to achieve what no student has achieved ever before. In 2024, he won the European Universities Debating Championship, triumphing over 185 teams and cementing his place among Europe's elite. 1 year later, he made history again at the Asian British Parliamentary Championship in Malaysia, debating, and he became the first person from outside Asia to win this tournament and the first debater ever to win the championship on two different continents. Andy was also awarded the finals Best Speaker, making it a double honor, highlighting his precision, clarity, and analytical depth that define his style. With that, I welcome you to the stage, Andy, but I would like to ask you if I put away all of these laurels and achievements and, all the stuffing which makes the pie really interesting. What would you like to introduce yourself as in your essence? Like, who do you think you are on a personal level?
So first off, thank you for the wonderful introduction. I guess beyond the debating, you've covered that I'm in Trinity College Dublin. I'm studying mainly political science and philosophy these days. I quite enjoy reading up on those topics and doing research along those lines. Outside of debating, I'm a massive rugby fan. I like cycling. I like traveling. I'm currently enjoying the fruits of finishing up an exchange in Singapore by spending a bit of time in Thailand, just outside Bangkok. And yeah, just enjoying some of the sights and sounds as you can hear a train going by in the background. Certainly a different locale to Dublin, but yeah, I'm just somebody who likes going around the place. Has a few extra hobbies on the side, but heavy debating focus, of course.
What kind of hobbies do you have?
So I'm a massive rugby fan, and something that people don't really know about me is before I did debating, I was like really, really into both rugby and powerlifting, and they were like my thing. I was just, you wouldn't think it looking at me now, right? It's not really the powerlifting to debating pipeline is not really that great. But I was loving it until COVID comes in. No contact sports, no
Yeah.
gyms, and I did some online tournaments. I enjoyed it, and that's how I got into debating. Really, yeah.
So if it wasn't for COVID, would we have never seen Andy the debater? Is that a
Probably,
possibility?
yeah.
That's
Yeah, I'd say
crazy.
so.
Fair enough.
Yeah. You would not have seen Andy the competitive powerlifter though. My stats were not legendary. I think. Yeah.
And you're studying PPES.
Mm.
I'm used to the technology PPE. It's sort of new for me to sort of go towards the sociology element being added into
Mm.
PPE. But what made you choose PPES as a subject, especially in Ireland?
So the main reason is that I didn't really know what speciality I wanted to lock into coming out of school. And so I think that coming into a very broad-based degree, which teaches critical thinking, allows you to specialize, and also gives you a variety of different paths you can go down, was quite useful. Also, a lot of people I looked up to and was consulting with in university had done the degree and really enjoyed it. Some debating names actually you would have heard of: Jack Palmer, Dylan McCarthy, Kevin Hamill. They were all
Yeah.
involved in it, and yeah, I've actually loved it. I think it's a great course. It was between that and law, the classic debating pipeline.
Yeah, fair enough. And when it comes to Trinity College Dublin as well, do you think the sort of the history of Hist also impacts the way you debate, and what would you speak along those lines?
So absolutely it does. It's hard to not feel I guess, the lineage that's there when you are going into things like training, and you know that Sally Rooney, who's the big international author, had broken top at Euros back in 2013. You're aware of these things before you get involved in even debating
Yeah.
at a very competitive level. You're aware that before I was in, the year beforehand, we had a team in the final. We had Naomi Panovka and Daniela Williams, and we had Kevin and Jack Sinnott setting the points record at Euros. And these things, I guess, even if they're not around, like Sally Rooney's not taking our training sessions, but it still gives you a sense that you're part of some grander story within the debating lineage there. And of course, resources and knowledge and institutional knowledge of coaching has remained within the structure, which is very useful.
Very interesting. So I think again where we come from, so Indian Debating League sort of serves primarily, I would say, school students although we have quite a big community of university students as well in India. And we are currently still building that history of debating. I mean, we have some good names. We have Tejas Subramaniam as one of them, but there are a couple of sort of names that still have to be pushed forward for us to have that lineage, right? So perhaps I want to go into like sort of two segments for you. The first is, what would you think is the biggest advantage that you have as a person who's coming from that place of lineage, right? That you felt impacted your personal style, and as a leader now, as a convener now in the Hist as well, what would you say is impacting others around you? And number two, if that impact wasn't there, if that lineage wasn't there, how would you perhaps borrow from other lineages around the world, or sort of try to build on top of the giants that came before you, without actually having them be some people who look like you, are from the same place as you, things like that? Yeah.
Absolutely. So I might start with the second part of the question first. And here I'd actually like to say that I did, certainly when I was in schools, build upon the lineage of Indian debating, because the World Schools team, particularly of the 2018-2019 era, is one of the best teams, probably the best World Schools team ever. And of course, India won the World Schools Debating Championships last year. So I think that even if it's been difficult to translate a lot of that into the university circuit, either because people leave or because, as someone like Tejas, you go over to a different circuit. I think that there still is a wealth of talent within the Indian debating circuit. I mean, I got my ass kicked by IGNU enough times at the Asian British Parliamentary Championships to know that there's a wealth of strength there, you know? So, but more to the point in how you learn from different circuits, I think that there's just so much debating, like literature and recording out there, that if you were to kind of take the technical skills out of that, but also even if you're trying to figure out how to make it from a circuit which doesn't have the same enormous resources and backing as the Hist, there are examples set out there by Zagreb, which is able to build itself up from a circuit which was maybe breaking, but not getting to the level of breaking top at Worlds, but was able to do that through just consolidating resources, having good training. And I think that other circuits can build upon that through doing things like all the classic drills, sparring against PM speeches, doing matter filing, whatnot. The second part of the question then is, how do I see the Hist as an institution and what advantages are there? And I think that the main things are, first, coaching is just phenomenal the whole way through my school's career. And I owe I say I owe everything to the people who have got me here, which is so cliche, but I think it is true in this instance. A lot of people have made it very far by being self-made. I'm not self-made. I had Jack Palmer coaching me when I was 17 years old. Then I got onto Team Ireland and I had two Euros semi-finalists coaching me. You know, like it's, and they're all, the Euro semi-finalist people were Hist semi-finalists from 2017. I go into the Hist and then I'm being coached by, Kevin or whatnot, who had broken to finals in Euros. So, and the coaching is one thing. But what I want to do in terms of giving back outside of the Hist is I'm starting up a YouTube channel. So I'm trying to put out some sort of YouTube instructionals, which could be useful for people from potentially outside of circuits. The other thing I've had a great opportunity to do is CA in Asia across different circuits. So going over to KL, going over to Dhaka and CAing competitions there, that was a phenomenal experience. And I think giving feedback to people within rounds, there's such a hunger to learn. I think the last thing, probably in terms of Hist resources, is just being very involved in the school circuit within Ireland and trying to expand it outside of the big Dublin schools and run more workshops in areas which have historically not had as many people on the national team pipelines. So that's a very convoluted answer, but I think that broadly speaking, you can learn from different institutions, and the Hist has been a massive advantage.
I think more than convoluted, it was quite clear to me as to where you're trying to go with this, especially with you sort of plugging in the YouTube channel. In which case, I'm going to say subscribe to Andy's YouTube channel. What's the tag? Do you have a particular name, or is it's just your name? Perfect.
It's just my name.
We'll tag it through in the description as well.
To be clear, there's better YouTube channels you could be subscribing to. I can list a bunch, but yeah, thank you very much.
We can have all of them listed, and they can subscribe to all of them. To be fair, so it's all good.
The Indian Debate League.
Yeah. Perfect. We're helping each other. But then, and by the way, we can have this interview. I know this is like during the interview. If anybody's watching this, it's fine. Assume you skip this part, but we can have this sort of as a collaborative video as well on YouTube if you'd like. So it can sort of be on both of the channels at one point.
Oh,
so,
very interesting. I'd love to do that.
It's a new feature which even I'm trying out, so it sounds good. Perfect.
Ah, that's great.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when it comes to your own debating, right? Walk me through your early days. I mean, you've mentioned how you've sort of been trained by people again who were considered giants, and it takes a village to create the kind of phenomenon that you are. But what would you say were the early days when it came to the inclination first of the skills required to debate? Because a lot of people would turn sort of the other way when it came to debate if they weren't already interested in the sub-genres of debate. Let's say speaking first or reading first or whatever
Hmm.
else. It might inculcate the basic first principle skills. Yeah.
So the first thing was that I was very, very chatty even when I was a kid, and so my parents put me into speech, drama, and poetry back when I was back when I was a little guy, and I really enjoyed that. I was very expressive. I wasn't very good, but I did enjoy kind of reading out my lines, getting up on stage. And I left that behind for a few years, went down the athletic route, you know what I mean? And I guess that teaches you in a different pathway. Even though I was never an athlete, I enjoyed the kind of discipline of it, the competitiveness of it, and that's something which debating offers in spades. Also, I was very lucky to have excellent English teachers going through my secondary schooling days. One I'll shout out, Rory O'Sullivan, who was my teacher most of my time through secondary school. He was really, really into global affairs, critical thinking, teaching like the classics like Macbeth through the lens of the war in Ukraine. And this is something which will always get you thinking. So that was my early inspiration into why I enjoyed debating.
Very interesting. And now, what I'm trying to see is essentially over there is you got the competitive edge and that sort of drive from your sort of physical pursuits when it came to powerlifting and rugby, and you got the sense of expression from speech, drama, poetry. Okay, very interesting. And as you went on and you sort of participated in your first debate, what was your first debate like? Do you remember the motion by any chance? Because I
Oh,
think
okay.
I think everybody remembers the first motion, you know. So do you
Yes.
have?
So
Yeah,
So this is what I remember, right? My first debating competition was on the 17th of April 2021. It was the CBC Mace. Round
yeah.
one was this house would legalize all drugs. We're opening government as PM. It was that was a great round. We got the win, fortunately, because I think we were on the right side of the motion, to be honest. But, and also it's a bid room in schools, so
Yeah.
it happens that way. But yeah, the CBC Mace. Prior to that, I had done a bit of debating, and one person I'd love to shout out here as kind of one of the earliest mentors, and somebody who I've listed a bunch of Euros giants and whatnot. A lady named Athena Wu was a year older than me in school and university. And when I wanted to get onto the Irish team, I decided that around COVID, I reached out to her through a friend and I was like, hey, would you mind having a look at some of my speaking? I was speaking for about 2 minutes now, not doing any proper reasons or anything. And she just sat down with me and she would watch me speak every single day and just gave me tons of feedback. She showed me her notes for getting onto Team Ireland. And leading into the CBC Mace, which was my first big major, I guess, even though it was an eight-room online competition in Ireland, that was my preparation. That was the person who kind of brought me on. And yeah, so that was my first debating motion. That first competition went very well. Shockingly, we made the finals.
How often do you revisit or sort of watch videos of yourself debating back then at the current moment?
So unfortunately, not that much footage exists from back then. My earliest recording is probably in Oxford Schools 2022, not the year we won, but the year before. In the semis, there's a PM recording from that round, and I'm quite partial to it. I watch back my old recordings. I record every round I do now these days, but mainly that's just for two things. First is I listen back to it before the OA to make sure that I'm not being delusional. So if the judge says, hey, you didn't prove this, I'm not like in my head, oh, but I did prove it. I'll listen back, and if I didn't prove it, I didn't prove it. The other thing is to make sure you make incremental progress.
Yeah,
You listen back and say, I should have said this. This is how I can improve. All the classics, you know?
yeah, yeah, 100%. And okay, and while there's not much footage of you back in perhaps your school days, uh, at least early school days, let's say, right? Would you say that the how would you say your style has changed in terms of your manner, of course, and of course the content structure as well? Like, have you changed the way you perceive topics itself from the get go, or is there something else happening altogether? Because the
So it
evolution of
definitely
yours, yeah,
Sorry. Yeah, it's changed substantially. The main way that it changed, I think, is that. So when I started out, I had a lot of kind of bluster, but not a lot of strategic understanding. I was kind of running just cases because they sounded roughly correct, or
yeah,
maybe I'd watched somebody else do it. Then during my time on Team Ireland, Kevin Hamill, who is I've shouted out a couple times here, who had a very good strategic mind for the game, basically sat me down and spoke through how debating works, how the meta works, and at that point, my understanding of debating far exceeded in my ability to communicate. So I was a very messy speaker. I was extremely difficult to track and understand, but I kind of knew what was going on. what ended up actually eventually changing my manner from a quite a messy but I guess strategically aware speaker into a speaker who is much less messy and has some of that same strategic awareness was preparing for Euros in 2024. I did a competition with Rumen Marinov, and in advance of that, he was like, Andy, I have no idea what you're saying. You've got to be simple. You've got to dumb this down. You got to throw out half your notes. Just say like, this thing happens. Here's two reasons why this happens. Here's five pieces of impacting, and then that's the end of your case. Stop trying to do all this philosophy nonsense. And it ended up working, you know? I think that if I'm going to shout out a YouTube video, watch his structure and clarity video. It's one of the most useful debate resources I ever had. So the broad thing is I was quite messy, but I had a decent understanding. Now I'm much more clear and leave out some of the strategic stuff.
Understood. And so, if I were to give you a motion right now, how would you sort of model or mental model yourself in the next 15 minutes? What do your 15 minutes look like?
That's a very good question. So I'm very formulaic in the way I think about these things. The first thing is that I will just write down a series of impacts on my page of consequences that happen on my side, on both sides. And then what I'll look for is what are the commonalities between these impacts? What are they aiming for? Are they affecting the same group of people? Are they affecting people in the long term versus the short term? So basically thinking of clashes. And from there, I will have a discussion with my partner and we'll drive some arguments out of that. So it's an impact first approach. That's something I didn't have historically. It used to be more what are the facts of the case. Now it's more about what can I prove at the end of this argument. And then from there, mapping out the most strategic way to convey that, which is often along the lines of what I disagree with the other side on. That's pretty much how I go about it.
Interesting.
But I'm
So it's
very
become more
writing.
tailored to win the debate itself in many ways.
Sorry?
It's become more tailored to win the debate itself in many ways compared to.
Yes, instead of
Yeah.
just constructing the
So
most.
would you say before your approach was more exploratory for the topic, and now it's become more tailored? Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you look at sort of schools debating, so now there's BP and there's the classic WSDC style we all grew up on, right? Do you have a preference between these two first, out of curiosity?
Uh, BP is a more fun game, I think.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. And why would you say that? So let's walk into sort of both the formats and what you think both provide, perhaps to the debating ecosystem, and which one you prefer and why, if that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the World School is a better one to start off at as a young student, and it's because it's a much more intuitive format. It's two sides versus each other. You're debating the issue. You're not doing bench weighing. You're not worrying about whether you're knifing your opening or any of these very strange intricacies of the game. And because of that, it just forces you to think of the best arguments and to formulate the best responses and to think deeply about the issue itself. And so I really enjoyed that. But I think that the reason why I like BP more is because of two factors. The first is because I like the strategic element of the game more than I like, I guess, the exploratory nature of it, of looking into the topics. I. Oh, sorry, are you still there?
I'm still there. Can you hear me?
Oh, you're
Can you
still
see
there.
me?
Sorry,
Oh,
it's just a
perfect.
red
Yeah.
dot appeared on the screen. So,
Okay.
yeah, because I enjoy the strategic element of the game more than the exploratory element, I quite like just the dynamics of trying to weigh against teams, taking strategic seconds, trying to make sure that you run vertical reasons for why an argument previously given was there. I just like the jigsaw puzzle and trying to sort that out. And the other one is that the prep time is different. So I like thinking. I think I can think quicker than I can think deeper, if that makes sense. So I'm able to come up with cases quite quickly, but I think that where clashes become extremely tight, detailed, intricate, that's where I have less of an advantage. And I am overawed by a lot of the great BP speakers who are able to sort out very, very complex material very quickly. That's not how I think. And World Schools really rewards that.
Fair enough. And when it comes to thinking deeply as well, have you, because you mentioned that this is some, let's say, a chink in your armor, right? What do you do to perhaps build on that chink in your armor when you know, okay, I perhaps can't delve into the deepest of cases as much as perhaps my peers do, or certain peers do that I look up to? What do you work on to build on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I think that are useful. The first is long form preps, where you think about the best cases for both sides. So don't just give yourself 15 minutes, force yourself to spend hours with the topic and go deep into the clashes to just ask what is the next level, force a level deeper. If you can't think of a level deeper, go read it. Go actually look into things like journals, go look into things like even YouTube videos and things online where people have discussed this. So that's probably been the most useful one for thinking about it. Another is, and I love this, I love detailed strategic conversations with other quite bright minds in the field. So I love sitting down and just I'm a very bad person for just texting random debaters and being like, hey, so I saw you run this case about gentrification this one time. What do you think of the analysis you give under this? Or, hey, you are a philosophy student living in Germany. What do you think about this German philosopher? You know what I mean? I love asking people who have better knowledge than me. And I think that comes from the coaching environment where I had so many good influences to reach to.
And what do you think it speaks to when it comes to your courage as well? Because a lot of people would be afraid to sort of put themselves out there in that manner, or even not get a response. I mean, some people would overthink that cold message or cold DM, right? So how do you push yourself beyond that boundary to ask those questions? Uh, and how do you also? So that's one element of asking somebody else that. The second is also how do you weigh the concept that your question might be perceived as basic or dumb, if essentially, right? Because that's also a
Okay.
question which comes through, which is a problem, I would say, of course, because if you're
Yep.
not asking your dumbest of questions, you're not growing still, right? But yeah.
Yes. 100%. So, on the first, I think that it's more a testament to privilege than it is to courage. I think that a lot of people feel as if they can't ask the question because they don't know people in the activity, or they don't feel as if they're good enough, or they've never had a coach they could ask questions to. And so, even though it's not a very helpful answer, I think that I've just always had great access to materials, and so I felt more comfortable asking people for them. I can't say that I'm better than anybody who's not asking for those questions. In terms of advice, with the massive caveat that I've found it much easier to ask for it, I think that a lot of debaters are just very, very happy to talk about debating, and are very happy if you say, hey, look, you did this good speech this time, or you gave this great workshop. What do you think of this other topic? Often we're very happy to give like a 10-minute voice message explaining it, or something more targeted and useful if you're not like me. In terms of like getting over the stupid question element, I think that one thing that might be useful to get past this mental hurdle is to remember that every single debater goes through all of the steps to get to the level they have to be at, which means that they had to ask that question of themselves before. So, for example, if it's a piece of debating terminology, like what is a model or something like this, and we never knew what it was. I didn't come out of the womb knowing what a model was. If it's, you know what I mean? Like everybody
Yeah.
has to learn this at some stage. And if you can't ask somebody, then there's often great debating resources about this. So, for example, if there is any debating terminology you're worried about, there's a link on series posting that I could put in the comments of this when it goes up, which is just an explanation of all of that. If it's how do I actually just speak for 7 minutes, I'm finding it so hard, then there's great workshop content out there if you don't feel like you're able to ask somebody directly. But just remember, if they leave you cold and undelivered, that's an L for them, right? They should be giving a bit of feedback back. That's not on you. And the worst they can say is nothing, I guess, or no. Though if they tell you anything worse, then they should be cancelled.
And what and what do you think of the concept that if they don't respond, follow up? Because people just get busy, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. I think that you could be like, hey, sorry, just bumping this. And if they don't respond a second time, then that's
it's fine.
probably that's exhausted. You can ask
Yeah.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's okay. You're not going to get a response. I don't get a response from everybody.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But if you ask 10 people and you get one response, then that's one piece of advice you never got before. I'm not saying you should spam everybody all the time. Be selective, be strategic. But when you do it, hopefully it'll be useful for you to get advice out of it.
Yeah, and now when it comes to your achievements as well, there are, I think, two in specific that I've highlighted in the introduction to. One was, of course, Asian champion, second was European champion. And I mentioned that you were the first person, especially who's non-Asian, to have
Yeah.
won the Asian championship, but also is the first person to win on two different continents, and that's to two majors. So, firstly, how do you feel as a champion of two continents in that manner? But also, secondly, What do you think changed when you debated in Europe to when you debated in Asia?
Sure. Okay. So I'll chat through first. How do I feel? Great. It's really cool. It was great fun. I enjoyed it. I haven't spoken since the ABP finals, so it's just very fresh in my mind, and that was a lovely experience. One thing I will say, just on a side note, and this is 100% my fault, but I'm pretty sure I said this to some like Trinity campus news organization about being titles on two continents. I am aware that David Africa and Toby and Cavan all won titles in Australia and also won them in Asia. I'm not the first to do that, so I'll get that on the table. And also them doing that's more impressive than me going over and doing this, right? Because I suppose there's probably extra barriers coming from Ateneo than there are coming from like Trinity, Hist. But with that said, very happy about it. In terms of what are the differences in circuit norms, I think that there's a couple of things that kind of struck me. The first is that there's a heavier emphasis on framing in this circuit than there is in the European circuit. And I think that's because there was a heavy emphasis on content dumping and on getting as much analysis into a speech as possible in Europe. And people speak much faster, I think, on the European circuit. Where here, there's more about you have your central case, you ground it in context and characterization, and you build it so that it's really, really robust. And that's the first thing. The second difference, I think, is, and related to this, a heavier emphasis on spec on this circuit and a higher threshold for having things believed. And I think that's a value neutral thing. I think that it's just a feature of the game. I think this became very clear to me when I was in NUS training and I was being judged on a round about US oil exports. And I made an argument, which I think was fairly robustly proven, but was based on a premise which is just not true. And a premise which is not true, but I think that the average intelligent voter in Europe would have credited, but the average intelligent voter in the Singaporean circuit doesn't credit. And I think that that's not a knock on the Singaporean circuit. That's just the way it is, and arguably makes the game better because you're forced to be more factual about the real world. So the two big things, empiricism and framing, are the big things on the Asian circuit.
Understood. And how do you say the style would change in terms of speaking? Because one thing which I've heard, so I've spoken to David Africa before as well, I've spoken to Luigi before, so some of these individuals who sort of go and dominate European circuits as somebody who've come from Asia, and of course world circuits as well, for that matter. But something that they point out is, number one, of course, the concept of who the average reasonable voter changes based on location, but also secondly, the manner in which you speak changes because of there's an accent barrier perhaps at points, right? There's a conversation of the sort of word choices that have to change. Did you have a look into these kind of things as well, or was this something which highlighted itself to you or became apparent to you right away as you were debating in both of these circuits?
Yeah, so I think that one thing is in terms of things like accent bias, I was very lucky in that I have a very like neutral Irish accent. I was never going to get any discrimination. I'm sure that's much worse the other way around. In terms of though the stylistic things, one thing which was quite interesting is that I don't think that there is an Asian style. There's a variety of different styles within the Asian circuit because the circuit's just way too big. So when I'm debating against people coming out of India or coming out of the Bangladeshi circuit, where I think that actually some of the speaking norms in terms of public speaking are quite similar. It's a very, fired up theatrical style, one which brings a lot of weight and a lot of pressure onto you, and you just feel as if there's this avalanche of style coming down your way. Whereas in somewhere like maybe the circuit in the Philippines, you're getting a lot of very cerebral analytical stuff with flair and rhetoric in there, but it's to punctuate a very kind of serene analytical way of looking through arguments. And so you need to adapt to different styles when you're in different rooms. And for me, I experimented with a couple styles when I arrived. The first was to bring the style which I used in Europe, which is kind of a more, quippy, a little bit more lighthearted. Doesn't work because I think that I just don't understand the same norms, and me cracking jokes, I'm the dude coming across from another circuit. I don't have the in jokes. I don't have the understanding, That's just not the thing I should be doing, right? The other was a very kind of chest bashing, theatrical approach. And with that, I think it's the old adage of if you argue with somebody on their terms, then they bring you to that level and they beat you with experience. And with that, I was never going to be able to just outdo them in that way. I was never going to be able to out rhetoric some of these speakers. And so what I adopted in the end, and you'll see it from the ABP final, was kind of a very debateries, like middle of the road way of speaking, which was one which was very based on here's my thesis, here are my three reasons, here are my impacts, here's how you weigh the impact. Because I think that any circuit can appeal to that, given the internationalization of debating with debate resources coming from different
Yes.
circuits. So with that in mind, I did a middle of the road style. It was fine against all different teams. I was quite impressed by all of the range of styles I came up against. And even within each circuit, it's a caricature. It's not to say that NTUA speak the same as NUSA. They're very different. But yeah,
In terms of your journey in these tournaments itself, do you have a favorite, number one, between the European Championship and the Asian Championship? And number two, what were these journeys like? If you could walk me through a story like cinema mode, and I just walk, like, sort of sit back with popcorn in my hands. But yeah.
okay. So I'll walk through the different ones. I think that I'll talk through them and then come to a conclusion about which one was better. I've never actually sat down and thought about it. I think that the European Championships, if you had to put that down to one word, it was probably just I guess I don't want to be too cliche, but something like pluckiness or hope, and something like momentum maybe is a better word for it. Where myself and Martha were a team that were fairly new. We'd only been debating a couple competitions before we showed up to Euros, and round one we started a bit slow. We took a first, which was quite fortunate, but we were not really firing on all cylinders. We finished day one on 9 points, which was great, but then ended up hitting the death room and the top room where we ran into Hadar and Yashai, the Huji team, who beat us 4 times in top room across that competition. And they were just an unbreakable barrier we couldn't
Yeah.
get through. Even when we spoke in round 8, we spoke at 86, 87. We couldn't even win top half against them. They spoke at 87, 88. And at that point, you just think, you know what? I've thrown the kitchen sink. I've emptied out my top drawer and there's nothing left. And these guys are just great. So the in rounds were very fun. I think that we ended up hitting some of the contenders and top teams later in Euros, just given the larger tournament size. Where ABP round one, it was just all breaking teams. Round three, all the finalist teams. It was just a bit of a disaster in that way. So yeah, in terms of Euros, then we break, we celebrate. Quarters was very tough. It was an IMF motion extending off of an excellent team from LSE who knew a lot about this, up against Waji Lucy, round robin champions, up against a very strong team from Tel Aviv. And that round could have gone any way. We got through, we had a huge amount of momentum. Semi-finals was our best performance. Finals, we both had, well, I don't know if we both had COVID. I certainly had COVID at that stage. I didn't know going into the round because my antigen tests were coming up negative. But if you listen to my voice then, I sound very hoarse, very tired. And we did enough to get by on a 5-2 split. So that was a very kind of dramatic, energetic
Yes.
run where it was we ride the momentum of breaking to get through our quarter, we ride the massive momentum of getting through the quarter to put in a big performance in the semi, and then we just gas out at the end of the final and we put it all on the table. Then for ABP, it was a different sort of run. I think ABP was a run largely determined by just being quite resilient, because going into the competition, I did mention it in the finals prelude speech, but I was quite sick going into that competition. Like beforehand, I'd been in the hospital. Afterwards, I was in the hospital, and it was really quite bad. I remember 2 days beforehand, we didn't know we were going to go. Myself and Wada had only done one prep competition because I hadn't been able to show up on weekends, and yeah, I didn't know quite how bad things were going to be. I was getting, if you don't mind me saying, I was going in for things like cancer screenings, and we didn't know what the results of those would be. And so going into the competition, I was like, wow, this could be my last big run. So there was that sort of pressure behind it. And yeah, we went into round one. We were okay. We got the job done. Round two, we also got the job done. Round three, we started to hit many of those big. We hit 2 of the 3 finalist teams. Brutal round, very, very tough. And I feel like every single stage of that competition, we just did enough to get by. We broke 10th after in rounds where I think we were on the tougher side of the motion 4 or 5 out of the 6 times. We were not the best team in the competition, I don't think, on skills. I don't think we were certainly not the best prepped. I saw these people with their big matter files. We had maybe 20 pages. But I think that some of the just experience, given that Wada is a phenomenal partner who had already won UADC and that I already won Euros, we just kept our cool in the out rounds. We scraped our way through octos and quarters. We misread the motion in the octos actually, which was a strange one. So I ended up having to throw out my speech after 2 minutes in when I got a clarification from CG. And I just gave a no-note speech for most of the rest of it. Wade dropped a banger in the DLO and got us through. Quarters, we were pretty much burned, but we had one mech that was left over from our opening, and that was enough just with a bunch of rebuttal to get us through. Semis is the round I'm proudest of in my entire debating journey. It really was just such an emotional ride. And final, it was that was another one of those coin toss rounds where it could go any which way and I wouldn't have any complaints. So with the context of how difficult life was around ABP has probably meant more to me. And I think that there's something about Euros being your first, which makes it so special. But I think ABP, just being on that different continent, holding that title, Irish flag around my shoulders, the Malaysian education minister asking, "Hey, where are you from in Asia?" and me just giving him a wry smile. Those things are going to stick with me for the rest of my life. And also the way the Singaporeans embraced us throughout that run, I think was quite beautiful.
Brilliant. I think there's so much to cover over there, which I sort of quickly organizing where I want to go with this first. But I think,
Take your time.
if I may touch upon the health concern, how do you feel now?
Oh, I'm good. Sorry, I should have said that at the time.
Yeah,
It was a false flag. There are a variety of things,
that's
but I'm good.
good to
I'm
hear.
not dying. I'm not dying. I should have said that
Yeah,
earlier in the
yeah,
conversation. But
that's good to hear. And how, if I may, sort of, I just asked two questions, sort of coming out of that, which
mhm.
sort of hit me, and you can choose not to answer them.
Yeah,
The
sure.
first is how do you think that impacted the way you were preparing, and not just preparing in terms of the time you lost, but the mentality you had going into the competition itself? And number two, do you think that phase of life changed the way you sort of your outlook on things overall? As now you're a philosophy student as well, so I can perhaps push you a bit harder on that one. But yes,
Yeah, that's reasonable. So, also, can you hear me over the train and stuff in the
yes,
background?
I can. Yes,
Cool,
all good.
grand. So, in terms of how it changed my preparation for that competition, going into Euros, my goal was to break and then take the out rounds one at a time and see how it went. For ABP, what I really wanted was to, and this is what I texted to my partner ahead of time and what I'd said to Wada as well, was um, I wanted to make it far enough into the competition where I could get in front of an audience and thank the people I loved, and say something to the people who had meant a lot for me. And I dedicated that one to my mother before I even stood up to speak, and that was largely because when I was quite sick. She just dropped everything, got on a flight, came over to Singapore, which of course there's privilege in being able to do that. It's not a marker. I think she's a phenomenal mother, but I understand that other people aren't lucky enough to get that opportunity. But yeah, I just wanted to tell people like my mom and people like my dad. My biggest regret from that competition is I couldn't shout out my brother. It was written on the page, but I didn't get to say it. Just to tell people I loved that I cared about them so much. After that, after semis, basically, I felt as if we'd already done it, especially because the semi-finals was around about whether you undervalue or overvalue your losses. And coming into Euros as well, the week before my aunt passed away, so I'd never really gone into a majors feeling 100%. And thinking about how you're able to handle those losses and whether you undervalue or overvalue them, considering the health losses, considering my aunt and all those sorts of things. I think that was a very cathartic speech. I was able to say something I really believed, and I'm very grateful for the CAs and for the luck of the draw that I was able to be put in the position for that. If you watch through that speech, it's probably why I say that I speak very debaterese through that competition. Not in that round. That round was just purely from here, I guess. In terms of how it made me think about life in general, my thinking was just to enjoy things as they came and to see what happened. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but yeah, it wasn't that I was sure that I was on my way out. It wasn't that dramatic. I guess it was just kind of no one had any idea what was going on, and that was being floated. So yeah, taking things one at a time, based on that, and in the lead up, wanting to say I love you to the people that mattered. Really, yeah.
I love that, and I think there's such a emotional arc or a story character arc essentially when it comes to these kind of things, which makes me not just proud of you as a person who just got to know you essentially like over the screen, but I think emotional resilience and the ability to navigate highs and lows of all kinds are what sort of define a champion. So even if you've not won these tournaments, I'm sure any viewer over here can sort of applaud you on the sort of figuring out a way to not just rise through this, but also speaking of all of these things from the lens of you can also do it to the audience, right? It sounds like encouragement to anybody who's going through anything or will go through anything, which is the nature of life, of course. Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I will say one thing before we move on, which is that, and I think that in line with this, um, I think you're right to say that anybody who goes into competitions like this with baggage, it's tough to overcome and to even get to the first round. And I'm aware that there are so many people who would have gone into Euros or ABP with things like this that I never even knew. I would never would have heard. I didn't tell anybody at the competitions unless I really had to. And I don't know. I feel like I don't even know really what I can bring from this other than that I just I love these people. Like I really feel like such admiration for them, and even though they'll never get an opportunity to have that story told, I just really hope they're proud of themselves. And that's very sappy, but it is true that you don't get this
Yeah.
opportunity. I'm here because I won the competitions, but a lot of people have overcome much larger barriers than this, and never get seen. So yeah,
100%. I
kudos.
think there's a quote which I quite like, which goes, if you're winning at everything, then you're probably not growing. And growing is the most important form of winning. And I think if I sort of adapt that to situations of these nature where emotional resilience is paramount, regardless of who's winning the championship, who's not, if you've gone through these barriers, even the concept of surviving these challenges, right, is a win from that angle. So, 100%. I will
Yeah.
quickly sort of, rather than pushing on to take you on this subject, I think I'll walk through the second part, which is, you were talking about how there was one competition where you've prepped a lot in comparison, and one where you only had 20 pages of preparation and you were able to sort of stick to your experience and sort of dig deep into that to get through those rounds. Based on these factors, which one would you say was your preferred tournament, particularly? Like the way it sort of led into it. I would assume, of course, there is the one with no health concerns, but uh, when it comes to
Yeah.
the preparation itself, of course, like if you just look at from the preparation angle, which one would you prefer?
So Euros was better prep, definitely. I think in a couple ways. One was that we got to do more competitions in advance. Like me and Martha are a strange team in that we only did, I think, three or four competitions prior to Euros. So like we weren't a very deeply prepped team, but compared to doing one competition online in different countries, with like it's a very different level of prep. The other thing is that even though I haven't really been big on case or matter filing leading into competitions, um, firstly, I've had partners who've been extremely knowledgeable, and have brought that with them. I think Martha and Wada are both just exceptionally intelligent people, and that's been quite useful. The other thing in terms of enjoyment outside of preparation is that there is something about having all of your friends there at something like Euros. And even my dad was able to go for the final, which was wonderful because it's only one small hop across the pond in Scotland. So it felt, I guess, like there was more of a community there, compared to ABP. That's to be expected. That's no knock on the people in Asia. I made so many wonderful friends in both within the Singaporean circuit and across different circuits who I admire quite a bit. But you're never going to substitute several years of getting to know people over the course of a week or a couple months. So yeah, I think the Euros was more fun in that way.
Fair enough. Okay. Now, moving swiftly on into your sort of your experiences in Ireland or your educational ventures as well. Now, we've already spoken about why you chose PPES, but why did you choose Trinity College Dublin? Because I know there's a bit of a rivalry between TCD and University College Dublin. So, what's your take? How do you weigh
Yeah.
these universities?
Okay, that's a very good question. So, interestingly enough, when I was always getting ready when I was a school kid, my prep was always in UCD every weekend. So that adds an extra layer of drama. And the people who were sparring against me consistently were Rob and Shane and all those guys. So I guess in a debating way, I feel a strong affinity towards UCD, and I really love the societies there. But irrespective of debating, because debating wasn't the biggest determinant in choosing college, I thought that the program in Trinity was better. I thought it had more flexibility. I love Trinity as a location. It's the center of town. There's all of the different bars and restaurants and whatnot sitting around. And yeah, a lot of my friends were going as well, people who I cared about to a great extent. So yeah, all of those things kind of came together. And it also doesn't hurt that the two biggest societies on campus are debating societies. That's always useful, the Hist and the Phil.
And Apart from debating, which societies or activities do you participate in university? And what's your sort of day to day like? So if I were to sort of spend a day with you in university, where are we going? What are we doing?
Okay, so I think that typical day in university, I'd have a few hours of lectures. In between lectures, I have friends that I knew coming in from secondary school. I have some friends that are in the Hist, but the Hist is not just a debating society. It's got thousands of members. Competitive debating is just one part of it. There's tons of different things going on. There's karaoke nights. There's guest speaker events. There's even like Trinity five-a-side football happening in the Hist. And so most of my friends are from the Hist Phil sort of area, but that doesn't mean that most of my friends are debaters necessarily. I
Okay.
think that a lot of them are people who have never said, who never, they don't know what a BP is, but they care about ideas. They care about learning about the world. They're curious people. I haven't gone into the powerlifting society or the rugby society. I think they'd crush me, but that's not to say that they're not lovely people. Maybe I'll try it out next semester. But I also spend a lot of time with my partner Kira, who's over here in Thailand, which is why I'm over here at the minute. So yeah, I haven't given you quite a walkthrough, but they're the sorts of things I'd be doing.
Fair enough. And what was the exchange program like? Because we spoke about that a moment ago. What's the exchange program like? What was the experience that you had? Yeah.
Oh, it was wonderful, and I'm really, really fortunate, because these programs are they're not offered to the same extent in all universities. Trinity has a good exchange program, and I just loved living on campus for the first time in my life. It was crazy. The first time I've been moved out, I've lived with my parents all the way up until 6 months ago, and now I've spent a lot of time out of the country. I spent July working over in a summer school in Cambridge, and then I was spending August, September, October, most of November over in Singapore, and I'll be spending December, January in Thailand. Um, I got to do a bit of travel in between, which is lovely. Going to new lectures, meeting new people, checking out some of the cool like parts of NTU. They've got the Hive, which is this beautiful building they have for the social sciences. It's a brilliant place to walk at night. I'm a big fan of NTU. People make fun of it here because they say, "Oh, it's out in the middle of nowhere," but I think that there's a joy in that. You're out of the busy life. You've got some nice scenic places to chill and walk around. Um, and the main part of exchange, I think, was getting to meet some new people. I met a lot of like really lovely people here, whether it was through the exchange program or through the engagement with various debating societies and activities.
Perfect. And when it comes to community, because now you are living in another country as well, is the community, which is the Hist, right, still actively involved in your life day to day? And are you doing this virtually? Are you having meetings virtually, or have you taken a step back from debating or Hist as a whole at the moment?
So yeah, I've actually been quite involved still. So it's a train going by. Yeah, I'm
It's
quite
all good.
involved still with the Hist. Yeah. I am doing online sessions, or I was up until now. It's exam season, but I was doing online sessions once a week. The time zones are a bit weird, so it was a bit of a middle of the night job. But I've been broadly speaking on Irish time and lucky enough to stay on Irish time since I left because my lectures start in the afternoon. So I get up like I would in Ireland. I do my lectures in the evening. I do my hist work. I still keep up to date with my friends there, give them calls, stuff like that. But I think it's very important as well to step back. I'm nowhere near as involved in it as I was before, even though I am still involved. I'm not speaking at competitions for them. I'm not spending time, obviously, with the people who I'd grab a lunch with or go out around town with. And instead, I'm substituting that with people I'm meeting here. So, yeah, still involved, but not dominating my life.
Fair enough, fair enough. And uh, going into this sort of a session where I would like to ask questions about what debaters could do to instantly improve their skills. And when I use the word instantly, of course, it sounds counterproductive because it is a time-taking journey, theoretically speaking, right? But let's say I'm not asking you to give them tips which makes them cut corners in terms of the time duration it takes to apply those skills. But what are the things that they're not observing? What's the information gap some people have at a lower level of debating versus at the level of debating you are at, which is elite in nature?
Okay, cool. So the first and most important things that were useful for me was just listening to more debates, and I think that this can be done quite passively. So even though passive improvement is not a very time efficient way necessarily, because you have to watch debates, You can make it time efficient in that whenever I'm in the evening going for a cycle or going for a walk, or I'm like taking out the bins or doing some chores around the house, I'll just have my headphones back there on my head. I'll have my phone in my pocket. Usually, I listen to the speeches on 2 times speed just to make sure that I'm tracking or like testing my tracking, and just put on a playlist of debates. Go to a competition, watch the way through. Also, things like um, watching like motion breakdowns and things like this just allows you to be familiar with the way the people speak and the arguments they broadly make so that you can come up with them and identify them quicker in prep. The second thing that people can do, and I think that this is if you have access to competitions, is you can make better use of your discussions with your adjudicators. Part of this is that even though I'm getting better at it now, I've never been a particularly, I guess, a gifted judge. I've been terrible at judging rounds that I've been in. For instance, I think the people who spoke with me will say, for instance, that I was certain we dropped in the octos, the quarters, and the finals of ABP, and that we lost nearly all the in rounds because I'm just quite pessimistic. But that also means that if you have that humility to, I guess, assume that you could be losing and then listen to the judge very specifically about the areas in which they might have had you losing and be as charitable as possible with it, then you will, and not about taking down the 3 pieces of feedback in the notebook. Many times I won't have feedback taken down at all. I'll just chat with the judge and say, look, you thought that my characterization was off. What does that mean specifically? What could I have said maybe in this? And not just getting the marking scheme, but can I generalize that? Why would I do things like give a very granular piece of picture painting about what my impact looks like? Is that so that I can save time efficiently elsewhere in my speech? Is it so that I can make an emotional hook to the judge? Is the way to do that better to read more, or is it to watch more movies? Is it to write essays with myself? And just always asking that extra question to the judge, not about the call, because the call is settled. As long as you broadly understand that it's okay. Just about the improvement. That's the important part. Make sure that you ask that second, third level of question with your judge. And when I've been judging over the last few weeks, that's what the best speakers I've been judging have been doing. They've been coming up and saying, yeah, look, the call, whatever, we understand it now, but not only what are the 3 pieces of feedback, but why are they the feedback? How can I get better at the feedback? Is this a good way of doing it? Had I have said it at this point in the speech, would I have been able to get higher speak to win this round? Things like that, you know?
I love that. Specificity is key over there. And when it comes to the global debating ecosystem as well, how have you seen it grow? So where do you think it's grown in the manner in which now everybody knows everybody, theoretically speaking? So like there's a bunch of people who, of course, you can expect in certain tournaments, and you know you're going to meet them year after year, and it's just going to happen. And then there are other names which pop up every now and then, but you know, okay, these are like the 5 people or 10 people I can look forward to meeting in XYZ tournament, right? Do you think this was the same maybe 5 years back, which I think it's definitely grown into that a bit more in the last few years, but still, I'd love your thoughts on this. And the second element of this is also, how do you see it growing, especially, at least from your perspective, what's the ideal scenario? Yeah.
I think it should grow as much as possible. I think that I'm very open to the idea of more online major competitions. I liked that there were online majors bids going on. I like the fact that Uhuru Worlds is growing and things like this. Because I think that the largest tragedy is that even though it's correct that I do see the same sorts of people consistently at these competitions, that there are just exceptional speakers who I don't get to see. And I think that coming to Asia was the ability to see that more than ever. Going especially to Dhaka and seeing like just the level of speaking that's there, and these speakers saying, well, I could never go to a major, or I could never even attend an international competition. And you're thinking, how did you get this good without ever going to a competition at this level? Like how, because it's all well and good for me to give all this advice about watch the speeches, give the solo PMs. But there's a lot of people out there doing this, but you just don't see it. And I'm sure it's the case in India. I'd actually be quite interested to go to India at some stage and
We'd love to
work
have
on a
you. We'd
competition
love to
there.
have you, yeah.
Yeah, no, it'd be phenomenal. Because I think that the way to lower the barrier to entry to let some of those speakers come in is like these online competitions, because barring debating getting a large cash injection, there just isn't the funding to
Yeah.
host very accessible large international in-persons.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point. And how do you see global debating evolving in terms of the training mechanisms, and should it involve when it comes to artificial intelligence? Because I've seen sort of the rise of a couple of ideas when it comes to how you can inculcate AI in your research for debates, when it comes to uh, just the general mentorship, when it comes to having a custom GPT kind of wrappers. Uh, do you think that's the way forward, or do you think that's probably not going to be that good for critical thinking?
So I think that there's an element to which outsourcing your critical thinking to an AI is not useful. I think that you need to use it strategically. I don't currently use AI in any of my preparation for competitions, but I don't look down on anybody who does. For instance, there was the great story of, I believe it was Marina Kojic and Paula Breyer, who won ESL Worlds a couple of years ago with their case file almost entirely made by ChatGPT. And that is very time efficient, and there's a lot of people who can't spend all the time I do watching debates or things like this. They can't sit down and Matterfile all day, and so because you got a job, you got people to take care of at home, and so of course it's a useful resource to use in that way. In terms of how you specifically prompt it and you train and personalize a GPT so that you have like an AI which is better suited towards training you. I think that's beyond the scope of what I can give advice for. But if it works for you, it works for you. Just don't do it in competitions because it's fine to do things like matter files and case files in advance. It is indicative of work ethic, but to the extent that you are having somebody debate against a centaur, or you're having them debate against an engine, if you were to put it in chess terms, I don't think that's fair. So yeah, perfectly legit tool. If it works, it works.
What is the next what does the next goal for you look like in debating? I assume you're eyeing worlds.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
funny one about Worlds is I've never gone, and I'm not going this year. So I think that's part of having my split of debating not dominating life. I've always liked
Yeah.
to have my Christmases to spend time with family. Last year I had exams. This year I'm going to be out in Thailand. I'm not going to go to Sofia, but I wish everybody best of luck. Outside of that, though, yeah, there is an extent to which every single debater dreams of going to Worlds and having a deep successful run, and I will go to Ottawa. So I have one eye on that. Um, it would be wonderful. No Irish team has made it in like to the final in a very long time. For instance, the closest we came 2022, we made semis. The Phil made semis, lost
Yeah.
on a split, I think. But yeah, that's definitely a massive goal. I'm
Yeah.
also probably going to speak at Euros again, just because I did it in first year. I'd like to have another try. It's so much fun. I'm not going to go like with my hardcore 500-page matter file. I'm not going to be speaking at a million miles an hour. But I just want to go with my friends and enjoy a bit of summer debating and maybe use it as a bit of prep for Worlds. But my main thing now in debating is I want to give back as much as I can in terms of things like coaching, in terms of things like judging and CAing and things like this, particularly coaching. I really love the opportunities there.
How do you think debate changes for you when you go from a debater to a coach or a judge? I know the role of a coach and a judge are different, but at least the concept of like having that bird's eye view on the debate still exists. So, what's your opinion on that and how your perspective shifts? What's anti the debater like compared to anti the judge or coach?
So if you had to rank them in terms of the ones I enjoy the most, I think coaching top, speaking second, judging third. I think coaching is just it's just the most rewarding and fulfilling part of debating, which is why my DMs are open for people to come and ask questions. I'm never going to say it's a stupid question, and that's not a oh wow look at me. It's more just I love talking about the game, and the best. I think I'm also more competitive. So I don't try to put it onto my kids, but sometimes when they're speaking, I'm quietly like, yes, when they say something good, or I'm maybe when they get a call that I think is dodgy, I'm more willing to talk to the judge, which is a downside. That being said, so more so to the question as how do they interact? All of them make you better at each one in ways that you don't fully anticipate until you try it. So I got better at self improvement and got better at positioning certain things. Like my positioning of extensions got better after I taught it to my kids. My ability to speak clearly at the beginning of a PM or LO speech has gotten better since I tried to teach it to world schoolies and things like this. Um, Judging, people classically say it's better for spotting circuit norms, for spotting gaps in arguments, for figuring out the sorts of good arguments that are made at the top level, for realizing where maybe intermediate and lower level speakers, people who were in basically lower rooms or earlier in their debating career, could improve. So I would say try all of them. They're all wonderful. But long term, I would love to shift the balance more towards coaching and less towards speaking, even though I love speaking as well.
Perfect. And when it comes to coaching, how do you approach coaching as a whole? So, are you the kind of person who will give tough love? So, it's just not good, doesn't matter what you say? Or are you more collaborative as a coach? Or do you think it depends on the person that you are coaching? So, it's sort of adaptive.
So I think that the ethos that you approach them with, the way that you speak to your students should remain relatively stabilized or standardized across the different levels, but the types of advice you're giving them should get more sophisticated as they get better. And the way that you should talk to your students, I think, is I know that this can be useful in different circuits, and maybe I'm too woke new age, but I really do think that you should be kind and accepting with your students because they're doing an after school activity, they're trying their best, they want to get something out of this. Often what they're trying to get out of it is not to go and win worlds, it's to make some friends, it's to enjoy their competition on the weekend, it's to better structure their essays for exams. And if you're going into it, the first and most important thing is to understand what your student wants. That was the first thing I did when I was teaching in the summer school in Cambridge, was just sitting down with every student and saying, look, what do you want out of this course? And it won't be the same for there. A lot of it was just public speaking, and that meant that there was more of an orientation towards public speaking than here are the 5 structural reasons you should be giving. So that's the first thing. Make sure that you understand what they want. Second is make sure that you have a reinforcing tone, but don't lose control of things entirely. Don't have it be a complete joke where you're just one of the gang. But don't be a tyrant. There's no point in traumatizing a kid over debating. It's just not worth it. And the last thing is, in terms of complexity of skills that you're building up, no matter how complex or simple, always just give 1 or 2 pieces of feedback. I think that anything more than that, I've seen coaches and I've had coaches in the past give me 7, 8, 9 pieces of feedback. And it's like, look, you're just flexing how good you are at spotting things about the speech. You're not actually getting me better at debating. You're not going to be able to fix 9 things at once. Yeah. And if you do, then you're going to fix the wrong things and you'll get worse at another thing and you'll just never improve. So pick one thing, be consistent, give resources, be encouraging, and figure out what your students want out of debating, because that will inform your feedback. That's my best advice.
Okay, and when it comes to the batch size, so let's assume I give you your ideal case. I'm sure this doesn't always happen, but if it was up to you, how many students at once would you want to coach? And how long do your coaching sessions last?
So I like to coach for about 2 to 3 hours because it allows you to do 2 spars. I think there's something really valuable to having that first spar and then seeing how well feedback is implemented immediately in the next one before it's forgotten. But that shows you who is really listening, who is really taking things on board. And it also shows you where is your communication style lacking. Because let's just say you say everybody across the board has to work better at their impacting in the next round, and they don't. That means that I haven't explained what impacting is properly. Because what's the easier explanation? That all 8 of my students aren't listening and are stupid, or that I have communicated something badly, right? So that gives me the best opportunity to fix that. The other thing is, I like an 8 student size for an intensive training, but I think that I'm happy with all sorts of sizes. I was teaching 40 in Cambridge, I was teaching about maybe 25 each week in my school in Dublin, and I've taught as low as 1 or 2 if it's more intensive stuff. But I think that all of them have their own skills and balances. I did teach a class of 50 something once, and that started to get quite hard because how do you organize BP debates when there's 6 different debates happening at once? There's not 6 of me, but
it's getting to
yeah,
tournament size, slow and steady, really local tournament sizes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe I should
fair
do
enough.
that.
Fair enough. And when it comes to you and your sort of own approach to debating or your preferences, do you have a favorite type of motion? For example, because you're a philosophy major, are you someone who leans towards the abstract or to philosophy kind motions, or are you somebody who prefers the real world sociopolitics, tech, research intensive motions? Yeah.
Yeah, so so I've always liked, until maybe very recently, motions which have the lowest spec thresholds possible, which are quite deep. And the reason for that is I think it's the best test of debating ability in its purest form. If I go into a motion that's about a very, very niche topic area and I don't know it, that's not an indication, if I fort that round, it's not an indication that I'm a bad debater. It's just an indication that I'm not a very globally aware citizen. And that's also something I should fix, right? It is beholden on people to have knowledge of debating. I don't think that people should just lie and make up nonsense. But if it's a motion about something hypothetical, something Black Mirror-y, I like those quite a lot. I think that it just is how well can you think on your feet? How well can you persuade somebody about something you've all just learned about together? That's my favorite.
I love that. I think one of my favorite moments from the debate. But I think this should be something which more people I would assume this should not be as controversial or as rebutted as it normally would be, right? Because the general skill of public speaking or debate is persuasion, and it's best tested in these scenarios. So I agree with that. Uh, when it comes to then your opinion on style, right? Because I think of late we've come to a style of like debate, public speaking within debates, where uh, we've gone from being slightly slower as speakers to really fast. I think there was a whole phase where people used to speak really, really fast in debates, and that used to actually scare off new talent as well, right? Would you say
Yes.
in that case you're also against that style of speaking as much as possible, unless and until, of course, the motion requires it or the debate requires it, so on and so forth. But like theoretically speaking, that would not be as persuasive to that. Like, if you think about that speaker going in front of like a room full of actual average reasonable voters is not getting anybody's attention, right? So what are your thoughts on like style of speaking when it comes to persuasion?
So I, all else equal, enjoy a slower, more rhetorical speaking style, and I'll give you a bit. But I also really, really like strategic, dynamic debates, and I don't think that they should trade off necessarily.
Yeah.
So, for example, I think the best debate I've ever watched was the World semi-final from 2020 in Thailand. The motion about the Brave New World. Both semi-finals are excellent. Either one is a worthy choice. Those rounds are both by and large, people speaking quite slowly, but also doing very, very high level strategic moves that interact down the bench. If you were to look at that debate in a modern context, not the same motion per se, but similar sort of vibe is the Euros final from 2022 about hoping that alien life exists. Very similar sort of motion about whether life is good or bad, whether we should want for things outside of our current scope. And that's another fantastic debate where everybody does very well. I think those are the ideal form of debating. Something which not very spec heavy, but everybody can relate to the idea of it,
Yeah.
and also something which is quite rhetorical. However, I wouldn't prejudice fast speaking. I think that you have to learn how to do it, just in case you have to deploy it. Not necessarily because it's always strategically useful. People over rely on it, and it's kind of a blunt force tool to get more content out, to speak quicker. Often it's way better to just have better word economy. I speak much slower now than I did when I was in Euros, for instance, and that's not just to adapt to the Asian circuit. That's because I think it's genuinely more useful. Um, but if you can't track quick, which is why I listen to the videos in 2 times speed, or you can't speak quickly, if it's the case that you actually just have too much content and all of it is necessary, I suspect it's not, but always good to have, then you're leaving yourself open to vulnerabilities. In the same way that I think everybody should have good knowledge about currency and about AI and about political science. You need to cover all of your bases in debating, but that doesn't mean you need to love all of them equally. You know, I love slow rhetorical speaking.
I love that because, I mean, pardon the sort of violent imagery I'm about to paint over here, but it's sort of like having an arsenal ready for a war, right? And you have all the options for all the guns you might require, but then you choose which one perhaps best to deploy. And I think you can have your favorite toy in that arsenal, but you don't necessarily have to use that toy because what's the point of using the wrong toy at the wrong sort of on the wrong battlefield theoretically, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
yeah, I think I like the sort of strategy you're applying to the debate as well. Fair enough. Okay, I think I'm going to the last section of the interview, so that's interesting, which is when it comes to your life in general, you know, and if you would want to look back at this interview maybe in 2 years, how would you want things to pan out in university, in debating, and just generally things that you want to pop this in here? So if this was like your quick wish list for 2026 and perhaps a bit of 2027 as well, what are we thinking of, Andy?
Okay, so I guess I'll start with the debating aspect of it because it's most straightforward. I would love to have expanded the scope of educational resources I put out. I would have liked to have got more of those DMs from people looking for advice and to have given them something that helps them improve. And I would have loved to have done more formal coaching. I'm enjoying the ones I'm doing right now, but I always love the new challenge of branching out within that coaching space. In competitive speaking, I want to go to Worlds in 2027 and have a run I look back on and I'm proud of. Whatever that is will be decided relative to where I'm at the time. ABP, my proud run would have been to get in front of a crowd and speak about the people I loved. Euros, look, I'm a competitive guy. I was looking over at that final podium at times. Who knows what's going to happen at Ottawa? Then in terms of outside of debating, I'm not entirely sure what career I'm going to go down yet. But I am currently looking forward at master's opportunities, particularly in things like international relations and security. And with that in mind, I want to get a first in my degree. I want to go on and do a master's. Potentially, I'm looking at LC at the minute, but I'm not entirely sure. And I just want to keep my options open in that way.
Yeah.
Beyond that, maybe I'll pick back up a rugby ball, and we'll see what happens then. Hopefully, that doesn't take me out of debating and move me into a different space. But then all the like normal the normal person things. I want to have great relationships with the people that I love right now. I hope they're all doing well.
I love that. I wish you all the best for that as well. And my last question for the day, which is, if your life was a movie or a song, you can choose any one of these two. Which one would they be?
Oh my god, this is gonna be different. We might have to cut the interview here so I think of some things. Because one thing I will say actually is, and this will dodge the question in classic politician style. My like favorite songs I got the Spotify Wrap the other day. There's such a mismatch in my life. They're all like, oh my god, the Olivia Rodrigo breakup song, but I've got like the happiest relationship and I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Or it's like, oh my god, I'm fighting for my life out here. It's brutal out here, but like it's not really,
Yeah.
So in terms of what would I describe my life as, I don't know. Cut off the movie halfway through. It's unfinished. I'll see how it goes.
I love that as well. And
Thank
I
you.
heard it's brutal out here. Sounds a lot like Olivia Rodrigo. If I
It
can.
is. It's brutal.
Yeah,
but-
there we go. Yeah, perfect. Okay, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you, Andy.
Pleasure, Sean.
And I hope to have you again on soon, one day, hopefully after Worlds. But I want to jinx you, so all the very best for that.
We'll keep it quiet for now, but I'll do that.
Subscribe to Andy's YouTube channel.
Subscribe to the Indian Debating League. All right. All right. Thank you.